Today, we are still in the 1970s, and the great question that we are addressing on this occasion is cheese versus cheese.
Sheogorath is one of the most famous Daedric Princes, getting a whole DLC to himself, getting a memorable vocal performance from the legendary Wes Johnson, and somehow capable of more craziness than is shown in Oblivion and Skyrim. Although whimsical, funny, and a lover of cheese, Sheogorath is perhaps the most dangerous of the Daedric Princes, a statement backed up by his origins and the Accords of Madness, a book series where he manages to get the best of each of the Daedric Princes in their own kinds of realms. No matter how much you love cheese, whether you're Italian, French or Swiss, do not mess with Sheogorath. Trust me, he is terrifying, and there is way too much craziness for anyone to handle. Sheogorath is the Daedric Prince of Madness, with his seat of power being the Shivering Isles. He didn't start this way, however, and those of you who have played the Shivering Isles know that Sheogorath was actually once Jiggalag, the Daedric Prince of Order. Other Daedric Princes were afraid of Jiggalag, on account of him being one of the most powerful Daedric Princes around, so they all worked together to curse him, and they turned him into the thing he hated most, which is apparently just Elder Scrolls' answer to Willem Dafoe. Still, they couldn't keep Jiggalag entirely contained, and at the end of an era, he enacts the Grey March, in which he can take his realm back for a day before turning into Sheogorath and going mad all over again. This cycle is eventually ended by the hero of Kvatch, but the trade-off is that they become the new Sheogorath in Jiggalag's place. It isn't known what happened to Jiggalag after the DLC, since he sort of just gives up on the Shivering Isles and leaves, but if you played the Vigilant mod, which you really should, you'd know that he has his eyes set on Cold Harbour, and well, let's just say, Molo Bowl isn't exactly taking it very well.
What the hell's up with this door?
But that's enough about Jiggalag. Sure, he's probably responsible for Sheogorath being as powerful as he is, on account of them having the same body for most of the time, but they are different people and are meant to be polar opposites. The whole curse with Sheogorath stopped Jiggalag from potentially conquering other Daedric Princes and their realms, but it didn't stop the princes from looking like fools by superior power. You see, Sheogorath is just as dangerous as Jiggalag. He just doesn't have the same level of ambition. He'd rather make fools out of the other Daedric Princes, which is what the 16 Accounts of Madness are all about. The problem is, Todd hasn't actually written all 16 yet. He was too busy making photorealistic bread in Starfield for some reason. Currently, there are only 3 books out. Book 6, Hircine's Tale, Book 9, Vamina's Tale, and Book 12, Malakath's Tale. These are all worth a read, and I'll stick a link below to the Elder Scrolls wiki that has these books word for word. I mean, you can obviously find them in the games as well, but I'll summarise them here because who wants to play an Elder Scrolls game to read? Now, I'm not sure of the chronology of all of these, but we'll start numerically with Book 6. Now for context, Hircine is the Daedric Prince of the Hunt and the father of lycanthropes, and he has a specific day in the year just for him, the 5th day of mid-year, which is essentially the 5th of June in the boring real world. Sheogorath goes to Skyrim and beckons Hircine for a parley, which he does because it's a special day, and proposes a bet to the Lord of the Hunt. Sheogorath proposes that the pair meet in the same place in 3 years' time and breed a beast for battle. Sort of like Daedric Pokemon, I guess? And while Hircine wasn't stupid enough to think that Sheogorath wasn't up to some kind of trick here, he did have something up his sleeve to make him think that he couldn't lose this bet. He went back to his realm and summoned an ancient Daedroth, and hit it with some sweet lycanthropy. When he was done, it was said that this creature had no peer in Hircine's sphere of oblivion. Confident, good old Hircine brought this beast with him to meet Sheogorath after 3 years, only to find that the Prince of Madness had chosen a tiny little colourful bird as his Pokemon, which perched atop a stone. The Daedroth rushed in and tried to eat the bird, crushing the stone it was perched on, only to find that the bird had jumped on its snout, unharmed. Like a great rage baiter, the bird continued to annoy the Daedroth as it hopped on its snout, and the beast clawed at itself, trying to kill its opponent, only to blind itself in its rage. This continued for hours, somehow, and the Daedroth eventually destroyed itself. Hircine was pissed, as you'd expect, burned the Daedrus body and went home, cursing as he left. Those curses still hang in the peaks of Skyrim today, but Sheogorath didn't care. A W is a W, and he strolled back down the mountain while whistling along to the tune of the smallest champion in all of Tamriel.
Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself.
Classic. While Hircine was soundly defeated, Sheogorath turned his attention to Vermina, the Daedric Prince of Decay, Corruption, and most importantly for this story, Nightmares. Book 9 centres around an artist, Darius Shano, who Vermina and Sheogorath stood over one night as he slept like complete creeps. Seeing potential in how others admired Darius's work, the princes decided to have a wager. Each would have 10 years to make this adored artist hated, and the victor will be the one who inspired the most hatred without the aid and interference of other Daedra. Vermina agreed, seeing her skills as better suited to the task, and went first, plaguing Darius for 10 years with horrifying nightmares. From 19 to 29, Vermina gave this man night terror after night terror, and these terrors began to inform his work. The problem for Vermina is that people are weird, and thus like weird stuff. Personally, I would have loved this guy's stuff considering that I read Berserk, and the people agreed, made him equal parts popular because his art was cool, and hated because, well, it wasn't exactly family friendly. But either way, his infamy grew, and as an artist, well, that's all we can really ask for. So, after 10 years, Vermina essentially made Darius a polarising figure in all of Tamriel, and did her bit. Now it was time for Sheogorath to take over. Oh, what kind of freaky thing did he have in mind? What kind of visions of madness would he curse Darius with? Would he turn him into an insane, rambling fool? Well, kind of. You see, Sheogorath's grand plan was to do nothing. He sort of just sat there with Darius, jamming cheese down his throat or something, and when this happened, Darius spiralled. The problem was, without Vermina's dreams, his work became plain and uninspired, and he began to believe that he was just mad, that the gods weren't real and that Vermina wasn't the one giving him these dreams, since she ignored his pleas as part of the bet. This got worse and worse over the 10 years, and he started daring the gods to strike him down if they were really real. When he was 39, he wrote a piece called The Noblest Fool, which is essentially a diss track on Talos, calling him out for joining the 9 Divines. As we all know now, people like to kill over Talos, and Darius found himself beheaded, hated by all. Vermina was a little butthurt that Sheogorath essentially did nothing, wanting to call him a cheater, but he stated that he had replaced her whispers with silence, and that silence had driven Darius mad. He taught Vermina that without madness, there are no dreams, and no creation.
I have a question for God. Why?
Lastly, well, at least from the volumes we have, Sheogorath decided to make it a hat trick and annoy Malakath, the Daedric Prince of Lies, Deception, Hypocrisy, and the guy Orcs worship. This is in Book 12, and the book follows Emeg Gro-Khaira, an orc who was the bastard son of a young maiden, a detail that will be important later. Emeg showed promise as a potential great hero among the orcs, a man of glory, being from a time before Orsinium's founding, an orc city-state, when orcs had to travel around to enforce borders. After making a fancy suit of scale mail at 15, Emeg set off from his home, doing pretty well for himself as a warrior and a mercenary. After years, he eventually came across an old hooded man who approached him at his camp and offered him a strange sword, called Neb Kreskin, which was a little worse for wear, but otherwise a worthy weapon for a great hero. Emeg was surprised to hear the old man speak the language of the orcs, but was wary of them nonetheless, trying to work out his angle, and was eventually convinced that this man was a salesman trying to trade for the sword. That was sort of true, and he ended up giving the old man some furs, food and coin for Neb Kreskin before he left. Emeg didn't use his sword for the first week, not needing to really, but when he heard someone approach, he drew the blade, and had no memory of what happened next. It turned out that he went full Baldur's Gate 3 Dark Urge on an orc woman, maybe a few years younger than him, flaying her skin and inflicting wounds that would have killed her 10 times over in a battle of madness. And no, I'm not going to show a corresponding image of that because I may not be monetized yet, but the British government is probably spying on what I'm searching up and I don't really want to go to prison. But that wouldn't mean Emeg wouldn't suffer consequences for what he had done. While he fled the scene and left the sword behind, Sheogorath was there to get his scheme in motion. He summoned Malakath and gave him the option to avenge one of his kin, offering to help. While the orc woman was one of Malakath's daughters by nature, Sheogorath stated that she was one of his daughters by habit, and gave Malakath a sword to banish the murderer to the Shivering Isles. Malakath agreed to this punishment and got to work, and beheaded Emeg on sight. But when his severed head said to Malakath that he was sorry because for some reason he was still alive when his head was severed, the Daedric Prince realised that Emeg was his son, a son he had after blessing an orc maiden. See, I told you that detail was relevant. Sheogorath then skipped in, reclaimed Neb Kresgen and took Emeg's head and put it in a sack. Malakath knew at that moment that he had condemned his son to Sheogorath's realm of madness forever. Damn.
Oh my dude, you just got pranked! Bet you didn't see that one coming, huh? Fuck you, you just got pranked! Yo! Pranked, baby! Haha! Filthy prank!
So, to conclude, Sheogorath beat Hircine's favourite Pokemon with the tiny bird, won a bet against Firmina by doing literally nothing, and got Malakath to kill his own son while claiming his soul for the love of the game, I guess. There isn't really much of a reason for that. But anyway, he may be mad, but he is smart. So, if we ever meet Sheogorath again in Elder Scrolls 6, just know that his cheese-loving is a front for a terrifying, cunning god who even Daedric Princes aren't safe from.
And so the pack was born again as the walls of your Vesker, to rule in life and serve in death as the moonlight-bound hunter. And so the pack was born again as the wolves of your Vesker, to rule in life and serve in death as the moonlight's dark